Hello, and welcome to Pharmacist Answers. I'm Cynthia, and I will be your host. You're listening to my Periscope broadcast turned podcast. Hope you enjoy.
I want to give some information about back pain or muscle pain. Kevin specifically complained about having a pulled or strained muscle in his back, but this can work for really any large muscle. Muscles, just like anything else that we use, can get overworked and they get tired. Hey, Kevin, I'm talking about you and I'm giving this advice just for you. But your muscles can get overworked, but your muscles have a certain process where they use up potassium and calcium in this process to allow your muscles to work. And a byproduct of this process is lactic acid, and that's what leads to the burn in muscles if you're actually working your muscles to help make them stronger. A lot of that process is gradual use of your muscle. So as you use it over and over and over again, that process builds up. Now, if you cause your muscle to make a sudden movement in a direction that it wasn't already going, that is what can lead to your muscle fibers to be strained. So if you think about your muscle fibers being like the fibers of a woven fabric where they interlock with each other, that's what your muscles do. And so as you stretch a muscle, it kind of pulls it apart, but they still stay together, and then as it relaxes, they go back together. So if you strain a muscle, it's usually because you yanked it a little too far. And if you pull a muscle, to actually have a pulled muscle means that you pulled them past their connection point, and then it requires some kind of binding to help it go back together. Usually that's why you'll wrap a pulled muscle to help get those fibers back touching each other so then they can heal and grow back to their normal connection point of rest and relaxation and being healthy. So Kevin, I don't know what you did to all those workouts you've been doing. Yes, so working out can definitely strain your muscles, but usually a strained or pulled muscle comes from forcing your muscle to do something rapidly that it wasn't prepared or used to doing. So currently I've been having problems with my back because my toddler weighs 33 pounds and she likes to ride in what she calls the backpack. Oh, I'm glad you're much better. And rest is usually the number one thing that you want to do for a pulled muscle or a strained or sore muscle. Giving it a chance to not have to carry such a big load is definitely important. But when your muscle gets injured, an inflammatory process actually happens, and that one muscle or those small, tiny muscle fibers can actually become inflamed. That's why an anti-inflammatory actually works well on pulled or sore muscles, because those fibers are inflamed. Now, you can't actually look at the muscle and say, oh, look, my muscle's swollen. You know, that's usually a joke people make when they're trying to show off and stuff. But you can't actually see a swollen muscle on your body, but the pain can come from those muscle fibers being swollen. So an anti-inflammatory, just the ones you get over the counter, Advil, Aleve, they can do the trick. When an injury first happens, ice is actually a really good option. That's what a lot of athletes do, because the ice stops that inflammatory process in its tracks. So all of those chemicals that freak out because that body part's been injured and it wants to make it swell and do all these crazy things, the ice puts that on hold and literally freezes it in its tracks. The ice is only good, they've done studies, and ice is only good for like the first short little bit, like 24, 48 hours of the injury. And then you don't want any of the processes in that muscle to be frozen anymore, because your body gets over the initial injury in that amount of time. And so you don't want to continue icing it, because then you freeze the healing chemicals that are going to that muscle to help make it better. So that's why heat on the other side is good, because it speeds up those processes to get the healing things to that muscle to make it better. And it also helps relax those muscle fibers from freaking out again, because certain muscles in your body, you can't ever stop using them altogether. You know, if it's like an arm or a leg, you can give that body part a complete break and just like not use it. Yeah, so mostly heat is the best thing. One, for relaxation, and two, for speeding healing. But muscles in your back, muscles in your shoulders, muscles in your neck, you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to stop using my neck and just like let your head flop for 2 days while your muscle heals. So those muscles still have to be used. So the heat helps relax them into a natural position so they can keep working at a level that they are comfortable with, but yet that healing process can keep going on. Just like the treatment for like joint sprains, like sprains and strains kind of thing, where you hear RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. The rest and the ice are important for just about any kind of injury, including like an open wound. You can ice an open wound and it slows the blood flow down so you're not bleeding. And so for muscle strains and pulls, ice is good to help slow down that inflammation injury process and keeps the body from freaking out and causing it so much problems. For sprains and breaks of joints and bones, ice is good, again, to stop that inflammatory process so it doesn't swell as much, and to keep it the normal size as possible. So like I said, you can't always stop using them, and you don't want to stop using muscles completely, because if it has been completely offended and injured, then your natural tendency is for it to recoil, and you don't want it to recoil so much that it tightens up on you, so then you end up with that muscle tighter. You don't want that muscle to end up tighter on one side of your body than the other side, because then you're at risk of re-injuring it, because you're having to pull it further apart than you did originally. So you want to give it some rest, but you also want to give it some gentle use or some gentle stretching to keep it as limber as the other side. Prescription options, there are anti-inflammatories that are prescription. Steroids work as an anti-inflammatory, like prednisone, methylprednisone are the main two. Those steroids work on inflammatory processes. And then muscle relaxers obviously work on muscles. Muscle relaxers essentially keep those muscle fibers from gripping too tightly so the muscle is floppy. So it doesn't get to that super tight recoiled position for you to like re-pull it in any way. So for the original injury, you can ice it. You want to rest it. You can take anti-inflammatories to help that internal swelling process. Then you want to add heat to help speed the healing process and keep the muscle relaxed. 800 milligrams of ibuprofen, that's a perfect dose. That's technically a prescription dose if you were going to get that all in one pill, but over-the-counter ibuprofen is 200 milligrams per tablet, so that would be 4 over-the-counter tablets. So you would want to take that every 8 to 12 hours. You wouldn't want to do it any sooner than that, because you would reach your maximum too soon, and then you would potentially lead to like that GI irritation or stomach upset that can come with NSAIDs pretty typically. And you could tell that it helped. Definitely, if you do it and you can tell that it worked, then your body obviously appreciated it. Not just your psyche, but the actual part of your body that was hurt appreciated what you did to help it feel better. So to recap, original injury, you want to ice it. You want to give it a rest. Anti-inflammatories over the counter can work just fine. After that initial period of injury, you want to use heat to speed up healing, to give it some relaxation. And then you want to gently keep using it or gently stretch it to keep it as limber, especially if it's a bilateral muscle, which bilateral means it looks the same on both sides of your body. So your spine runs down the middle of your body, and then you have a set of muscles on this side and a set of muscles on this side that work the same to pull you in two directions. So if you injure one side, then you've got one side of your body acting stronger than the other, and it can actually lead to imbalance and either re-injury of the same muscle or injury of the other side because it's having to pick up the slack. So that's why you don't want to stop using a muscle completely if you can help it, but give it some gentle use, some gentle stretching to keep it even as the other side. So Kevin, it sounds like you took really good care of yourself. Hopefully I might have given you some tips for if it happens again, or as you continue to heal, you can use some of the things for later in the process since you're past your original injury. So anyway, glad I could help you, Kevin. Thanks for joining me. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes so you don't miss an episode. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. If you want to join the conversation live, follow me on Periscope at Cyn Hendrix, CYNHENDRIX. You can also share your questions and comments with me on Twitter at Cyn Hendrix or email the podcast at pharmacistanswershere@gmail.com.